Thank you. Thank you. I'm very psyched to be here. I was coming in backstage. This is our 11th city we've been in this month. And you have a kind of formula for how things work. And I'm standing backstage and I see this ice bucket full of green bottles. And I reached my hand, I don't know what it was. It's Mountain Dew. And I said to the person I was walking with, like, why do we have Mountain Dew? JD Vance drinks Mountain Dew. Actually drinks Mountain Dew. And I know JD Vance very well, and I know that he's like the most authentic person in politics. But you often hear people say, and you can feel it on him, he went to Yale Law School, he's not really from Appalachia. I found the Mountain Dew. That's for real. You're not drinking this. They don't have this at the Aspen Institute, trust me. I was so impressed. And I'm very sympathetic to, I love actually his politics, but I'm not gonna try that. Sorry. I'm gonna have my little Perrier. I'm not a man of the people. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry it took so long to get in. This is what happens when your security is run by your opponent, I think. It's kind of hard to have an event. It's a funny system that we have. No other country does that, I don't think. We'll take care of security, don't worry. And just to make it super efficient, we're gonna let the TSA handle it. Because when you want things to work smoothly, like when you're late for your flight on Memorial Day weekend, Anyway, so I'm sorry about that. We have no control over it. I'm not alleging anything other than what's totally obvious. Oh, this just amused me. And I heard the media are here. I don't know. I know. Boo, 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 boo. And I heard even the New York Times, Politico, they're all here. No, I don't know. I just want them to stand up and announce who they're voting for if they would. I don't know. I don't have my glasses on, so I don't know where they are. I can't hear what you're saying, but I know I agree with you. If you were trying to express loathing, I'm on your side. And by the way, I would know, having spent over 30 years in their lair, and no amount of sauna, cold plunge, hot bath combinations can scrape off the moral stain of all the time that I spent there. But anyway, thank you so much. So I'm gonna, because we're running a little late, I wanna get to the interview with Senator Vance pretty quickly, but I just wanted to say, and it's much more interesting than anything I'm gonna say anyway, but I just wanna say something that he knows really well because he's been on the road since the convention, but I'm just remembering since it's been a long time since I've been on the road, which is that if you experience your country, the one that you were born in, and that you love and that your ancestors built and you will die in, America, if you experience it through your phone, which I hate to admit is mostly the way I do experience it, you really get a distorted picture of it. And it feels like a country at war with itself. And in fact, we're told that very often. This country's on the brink of civil war, and everybody hates everybody else on the basis of some immutable characteristic, on the basis of race primarily, but also of sex and then political affiliation. And basically, America is about to explode. It's the crock pot you forgot to turn off, and it's about to just blow up and wreck your kitchen. I love that. You know, it might be kind of a non sequitur, like scream out a 1970s era Leonard Skinner song in the middle of a pause. But to me, I'm grooving with you, baby. I know exactly what you mean. That's right. I can't quite articulate what you mean, but I know what you mean. Freebird. Anyway, the point is, you really get the sense that the country is at war with itself and that people really hate each other. And when you travel it, and we're going coast to coast for a month, we already have been coast to coast, that's not the experience you have at all. Like at all, actually. I can just tell you, as officially, and the New York Times has chronicled this at great length, as one of the most hated people in the world, I kind of expected to be yelled at, you know what I mean, at like an airport or a Starbucks or the lobby of a hotel. Not one time. And no, it has nothing to do with me. It's not because I'm so great or people secretly love me. It's that Americans secretly don't really hate each other, which is kind of amazing. It's true. They don't. And yet they have been convinced that they do, and they have in fact been inspired to hate each other systematically for decades. And I've watched this. The entire presentation of American history, again, driven by the New York Times, I've got to say, wherever the correspondent is, the entire presentation of American history is designed to make you believe that this is a country based on hate, the hate of Americans for each other. And they have been telling us, well, I'm 55, so they've been telling it for at least the 50 years I can remember going to school. They've been telling us this version. And that is the core problem of the country, is that people really, really hate each other. And looking back on it, I've been thinking of it all week. I don't think I've ever seen that, ever, not one time. And what I see actually is just the opposite. I see people of all backgrounds and all beliefs totally determined to get along with each other and doing it despite the encouragement of their leaders. And I think two things about that. One, I think it's quite revealing of our leaders, because what leader wants the people he leads to hate each other? That's like really the kind of the darkest thing you could ever want. If you're a parent, you know it is evil. It is the definition of evil. What parent wants his or her kids to hate each other? You want the opposite. Because when you die, the one thing you leave behind is the love of your children for each other. That's how your memory continues, because your children love each other. Almost no parent needs to have this explained. Every parent knows it intuitively. And it's not just the family, the most basic and important organization in human civilization. It's every organization, from your office to a military unit to your state to your country. Leaders have as their first and most sacred duty the responsibility to unite the people who follow them, to keep them whole, to keep them together. And to do the opposite of that systematically over decades, using the media primarily, but also now just from the podium, is evil. It's absolutely evil, because it's a perfect inversion of their duty. And they have tried harder than really any task. They certainly haven't put their effort into managing the economy or paving the roads or making it safe to walk to CVS. They've done just the opposite, because they've been so focused on making us hate each other. So that's the first thing I notice. So they're not just incompetent, they're really bad on a deep level, actually. No country deserves the leaders that we have. No state deserves the leaders you have, by the way, I can say. I've spent so much time in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I always think to myself, how is the worst place in the state allowed to run the entire state? I'm not gonna name it. But why do they have all the power? Why do the people with the longest track record of failure have total control over the rest of the state, which is beautiful and filled with great people? Like, how does that work? That doesn't look like democracy to me. But you can extrapolate outward to an entire country and say, how does a country of 350 million great people have such rotten leaders? And that really is a theological question that I can't answer, but it does. And here's the last thing I'll say before introducing Senator J.D. Vance, my friend. They haven't succeeded. And that is something to marvel at and to celebrate and to really deeply think about. Everyone's always shocked, particularly in these last 4 years since, I'll put it precisely, since Memorial Day 2020, when the revolution began, without telling us, and the country that you grew up in and all of its institutions turned upside down, and things you really loved and respected disappeared, and people who are close to you vanished from your life, and really it's been chaotic since then, all by design. And everyone I know, I think most people who are paying attention have had occurred to them at one time or another, like, wow, there's so much evil in the world, I'm shocked. And that's true, clearly. But what too few people, very much including me, pause to consider is how much good there is in the world, good that makes no sense. The love between people who don't know each other, who have nothing obviously in common except their common Americanness, their citizenship here, People who are not gaining anything by being kind to each other. In fact, who are encouraged not to be kind to each other and are anyway. What's that? That is as every bit as unnatural as the evil that we see. It does not exist in nature. It is outside of nature. It is supernatural. And that is moving among us too. And I think it's worth celebrating that. And if you look around this room, the first thing you realize is all that stuff they told you about how you were crazy because you noticed. Turns out you're not crazy because there are thousands of people sitting right next to you who had exactly the same instincts. And they came from very different places to arrive at the same destination, which is a commitment to being honest with themselves and those around them. That's all it is, it's honesty. It's not political, it's not ideological. It's being unwilling to lie. And every person in this room at one level or another, at one time or another, has arrived at the exact same conclusion, which is, I'm just gonna say what I think is true. And it turns out it's not just you sitting alone in your rec room throwing beer cans at the TV, feeling like a freak. It's most people in this country. And there's no greater blessing than knowing that. So on that note of totally non-political hope, I want to introduce Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, running with Donald Trump. So you actually do drink Mountain Dew, you're not joking?
Diet Mountain Dew, yeah. Yeah, it's my favorite drink. You need a lot of caffeine on the campaign trail. Though it's interesting, it's become a bit of a thing because I probably had like one Diet Mountain Dew a week before I started running for vice president. And then I started talking about it, and then people always brought me Diet Mountain Dews, so now I drink like 3 of them a week. It's one of many ways in which my health has gotten much worse, but I will say...
So you're not endorsing it from a medical standpoint, is that what you're saying?
No, not at all. But I will say, Tucker, it's awesome to be here, not just because I've been looking forward to this, but 2 hours ago, I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna have to call Tucker and cancel, I'm not gonna be able to come. And the reason is because we have our kids with us, and I took my boys on the campaign trail. We did a bunch of events all over Pennsylvania, which is a great state, and it's great to be here. And we go to Hershey Park, right, which is just across the street. Hershey Park's great. And my son says, my 7-year-old says, if I go on a roller coaster with you, you have to go on this spinny ride with me. And so legitimately, it's one of these things where it's not just spinning around, but then the thing that you're sitting in is also spinning around. So it's like spinning within spinning. And legitimately, 3.5 seconds in, I think to myself, I'm gonna throw up all over this ride. And it's like now that I'm a vice presidential candidate, I'm much more, people know who I am. And so there are 10 separate iPhones that are tuned on me. And all I can think to myself is, if I throw up in this thing, it's gonna be like one of those old sprinklers, tuk, 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 tuk. So I white knuckle, close my eyes. My 7-year-old and my 4-year-old are like, Dad, what's going on? I'm like, I'm trying not to throw up, boys. Just, leave Daddy be. And then we get off the ride, and I am so nauseous. I'm like, I'm gonna have to cancel tonight because I'm gonna go home to the hotel and be sick.
I think you're looking at it wrong. Puking on the tilt-a-whirl is the most authentically American thing you could do. No one would ever call you a phony again. I booted on the tilt-a-whirl. I mean, honestly, from Mountain Dew.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm feeling a lot better now, and it's great to be with you. And how's it going?
You tell me. You're running for national office. I don't even know what I do for a living at this point. But
neither do I.
So it's always hard asking someone who's running for office, do you think you're gonna win? Where are we? But I would say, and you explained this so well in a conversation we had recently, the polls really are designed to deceive, many of the public polls, probably not all, but many. And the campaigns, not just yours, but the Democrat Party's campaign, do have access to the most accurate polls. So, being as honest as you can be, where are we?
Where we are is we're gonna win. And I feel 100% confident about that. Look, if you go back in time 4 years, there was a poll in the run-up to the 2020 election, maybe the 2016 election actually, that had Donald Trump losing Wisconsin by 17 points, okay? And of course, in 2016, he won the state of Wisconsin. And what you realize is the purpose of these polls is very often subversion. Like they're trying to depress you. So they put out a poll in Wisconsin that says Donald Trump is going to lose by 17 points, even though that's an election he eventually went on to win. And I think that there's a lot of that happening right now, though I will say, even with the idea that the polls are fundamentally biased, I mean, we have internal polls that we pay a lot more money for because this is a very nerdy point, but you have to reach the right people to actually get an accurate poll. And because most Trump supporters, like if you called my family members and said, hey, I'm from such and such research, are you going to vote for Donald Trump? They would say F you and hang up the phone, right? So because of that, it's very hard to poll actual Donald Trump supporters, but you can if you're willing to actually go out and seek those people and do the right things. And look, the internal polls are great. I think that we have to work our rear ends off over the next 45 days. And, there's something really interesting about this election, Tucker, which is that if you sort of take the people who voted in 2020 versus the people who voted for Biden in 2020, the people who voted for Trump in 2020, we're probably about even there. Like I'd sort of give it a 50-50 chance. But there are a lot of marginal voters, meaning people who don't always show up to the polls. And if they show up, they're like 70-30 for Donald Trump. So it's basically, the name of the game is you can't get depressed and give up on your country. You have to get out there and vote, because if you do, we're going to win. So get out there and vote and we'll win. And look, the story of basically the last 30 years, in my view, is that our leadership has turned the American people into paupers in their own country, right? You're not going to own anything. No way you're going to own a house because the leadership has made it way too expensive to buy a house, and plus interest rates are too high. You're not going to have real public safety in your communities because we're going to import 25 million people. We're going to overstress the legal system. We're going to overstress the police system. You're not actually going to have a decent job because we want to ship way too many middle-class jobs off to China, off to Mexico. And so the American people, I think, they're fed up with it. They're saying, we don't give a shit what you think about us. We're going to vote for our own interests, and we're going to vote to save our country. But the thing that is really meaningful, and if I worry about anything, it's that we're going to get lazy and we're going to rest on our laurels, and we're not going to get out there and actually pound the pavement and vote. There are way too many people who know that the country is broken, who know that Kamala Harris would make a terrible president, but they have to actually get out there and do the thing that all of us have to do, which is vote. It's very simple.
We did an interview a couple of weeks ago with a woman called Casey Means. She's a Stanford-educated surgeon and really one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. In the interview, she explained how the food that we eat, produced by huge food companies, Big Food, in conjunction with pharma, is destroying our health, making this a weak and sick country. The levels of chronic disease are beyond belief. What Casey Means, who we've not stopped thinking about ever since, is the co-founder of a healthcare technology company called Levels. And we are proud to announce today that we are partnering with Levels. And by proud, I mean sincerely proud. Levels is a really interesting company and a great product. It gives you insight into what's going on inside your body, your metabolic health. It helps you understand how the food that you're eating, the things that you're doing every single day, are affecting your body in real time. You put stuff in your mouth, speaking for myself anyway, and you don't think about it. You have no idea what you're putting in your mouth, and you have no idea what it's doing to your body. But over time, you feel weak and tired and spacey, and over an even longer period of time, you can get really sick. So it's worth knowing what the food you eat is doing to you. The Levels app works with something called a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM. You can get one as part of the plan, or you can bring your own. It doesn't matter. But the bottom line is, big tech, big pharma, and big food combine together to form an incredibly malevolent force, pumping you full of garbage, unhealthy food with artificial sugars, and hurting you and hurting the entire country. So with Levels, you'll be able to see immediately what all of this is doing to you. You get access to real-time personalized data, and that's a critical step to changing your behavior. Those of us who like Oreos can tell you firsthand. This isn't talking to your doctor at an annual physical, looking backwards about things you did in the past. This is up to the second information on how your body is responding to different foods and activities, the things that give you stress, your sleep, et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to use. It gives you powerful, personalized health data, and then you can make much better choices about how you feel. And over time, it'll have a huge effect. Right now, you can get an additional 2 free months when you go to levels.link/Tucker. That's levels.link/Tucker. This is the beginning of what we hope will be a long and happy partnership with Levels and Dr. Casey Means.
So there's been this thing happening for the last 8 years, actually, but it seems to have come to a head in the last several months, where the realignment is now very obvious between the parties. And
yes,
you do see a bunch of pretty high-profile Democrats coming to your campaign, to endorse your campaign, and you see, honestly, some high-profile Republicans go over to Kamala Harris.
Correct.
So just to put it in one sentence, you got Bobby Kennedy, and they got Dick Cheney and his horrible daughter.
A hell of a trade, by the way.
Right.
I'll take that trade every day and twice on Sunday.
And I didn't mean to, I can't remember her name, so I'm going to go with horrible daughter. I think it's fair. How would you describe that realignment? Like, what is that?
Well, I think there are a couple things going on. So first of all, if you spend any time in professional Washington, which I've spent a couple years there, you realize that one of the things that gives a lot of people meaning is like playing a chess game with the lives of other people's children, right? And of course, if you think like that, you're kind of a sicko and you shouldn't be anywhere near power. But Washington is full of people who really like to go out and play strategic games with the lives of other people's children. And there's probably nobody who better represents that, of course, than Liz and Dick Cheney, who their entire politics for the past 30 years has been using American power to inflame tensions in the world, to draw the United States deeper and deeper into foreign conflicts, which either shouldn't exist at all, or certainly the United States shouldn't have any business in. And I think that I think so that's one thing that's going on, is if you don't think the United States should get involved in every stupid war in the world, then you're a Republican. And if you think the United States should send billions of dollars and tons of innocent Americans to die in some foreign country, then you're going to be a Democrat. And that's kind of crazy, right? Because it was sort of exactly the opposite probably 40, 50 years ago. But then there are two other big issues. The three things that really matter. One is foreign policy. Our side, I think, is rational and restrained. We don't want to fight every ridiculous war, and we're like worried about getting involved in World War III because we should be, because we have nuclear weapons now, and you have to be cautious about that stuff. The second big issue is, in my view, over immigration, right? If you sort of look at the Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney view, their basic argument is, let's flood the United States with millions upon millions of foreign laborers because that's good for business. And there are those of us who are saying, well, is it actually good for social cohesion? Isn't it good for workers? Hell no, so we're not going to accept that. The third thing, and the third thing that I think really divides the parties, and it's like me, Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump, we're sort of all on the same page on this, is do you think that the United States should ship its entire industrial base to foreign countries, some of which hate us? And if you think that's insane, like I do, then you're going to vote for Donald Trump. And if you think it's a great idea to ship our industrial base overseas, you're welcome in the party of Kamala Harris and Dick Cheney. And that's basically it. And those three issues, Tucker, have divided people, I think have divided the entire country, but actually only the leadership class. Because I actually think that like 70% of Americans agree with our viewpoint on these issues. I just think that the leadership of this country has gotten so deranged that they convince themselves that there's a great American majority for fighting a ton of wars, importing a ton of illegal aliens, and shipping all the jobs overseas. And I just don't think there is.
I would say it's higher than 70% consensus, and you know that because advocates of the positions you just described will never admit that they're advocating for them. No one will ever say, yeah, we just brought in tens of millions of illegal aliens. They lie about the fact they did it. So clearly there's no constituency for that.
No, that's exactly right. And, this has been a big issue with some of the microscope that's been put on communities that have accepted a large number of Haitian migrants in the past couple of years. So in Springfield, Ohio, about 20,000. There's a community in Pennsylvania that I think has accepted about 2,500 in a town of about 4,000 people. So there are people who say that this is fundamentally necessary because unless you import all of these people, that there aren't going to be any jobs. And I actually think that sort of gets it exactly upside down. The reason why people left these communities is because our leadership shipped all of their jobs to Mexico and China and other countries. So if you want to fix the problem, bring economic prosperity back to our country, don't bring 2,500 or 25,000 foreign laborers into small town America.
Amen. But it also raises I think an even deeper philosophical question, which is, who are you serving? Who's your loyalty to? I don't care how screwed up and fentanyl-ridden and post-industrial your little town is. The people who live there are American citizens, and they own the government. And so the people in charge have to care about them. But they don't at all. They care about their donors who think that their businesses will benefit from importing an entirely new class of workers. But aren't our leaders required to care about the current occupants of those towns?
I would think so. Well, here's one way I'd put it is, and I picked this up, this is actually when we became friends initially, right, is we were at some massive bankers conference, and I had just written Hillbilly Elegy.
I feel dirty thinking about it, yeah.
And I realized that what I had done in Hillbilly Elegy was write a very personal story about my grandmother and my mom and my sister, and there's sort of triumph and there's trial, and my mom struggled with addiction and then she got clean, and my grandmother raised me, and it was very much a personal story. And what I realized at that conference and at others like it is that a lot of our leaders liked the book not because they really sort of sympathized with the story, but because it gave them an opportunity. They'd pick one paragraph out and say, oh, well, this thing shows that these middle American, working class people are bad, or they're racist, or they're not worth focusing our attention on, or we shouldn't save their jobs, or whatever. They use as an excuse to ignore the citizens of their own country. And I started to feel kind of dirty about participating in this way that our leaders used my book to try to look down on their fellow citizens rather than maybe learn something about their fellow citizens and recommit them to making their lives better. And that fundamental breakdown you see in our politics all the time, Tucker, because look, there is nothing that pisses off America's leadership class. There's nothing that angers Kamala Harris more than when a working class person in the heartland of this country complains about what a bad job she's doing. And when you think about this charge that our leaders constantly make, they'll say, well, you don't want 20,000 low-wage migrants showing up in your town. You don't want to be evicted from your home to make way for 4 Haitian families who, by the way, are violating zoning laws to live in this house. You're a racist. That's what they'll say. Now think about this. What they're really doing is saying you are not allowed to speak up about our leadership screwing up. And when you realize this is the game that they play, I mean, look, you and I agree with this. I think we should genuinely endeavor to look at every human being as a child of God, whether they're black, white, brown, or anything else. I think that is an absolutely good principle. But I think that when our leaders call working class citizens who have almost no power in America in 2024, when they call them racist, it's not because they're trying to call them to some higher meaning. They're not trying to convince them to be more compassionate to their fellow man. They're trying to silence them and shut them up. And when you realize that our leadership is willing to take the compassion, what's best in us, that we love our fellow man and we love our fellow Americans, and use it as a weapon to silence people, you realize that Kamala Harris and everybody like her, it is a disgusting game that they play, and we have to reject it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, let me say it again, I think it's evil. It's evil to leverage someone's decency against him.
Yes.
It's the lowest possible
Absolutely.
thing you could do. But I have to ask, and I don't really answer this question, but you've spent time on both sides, growing up in where you did, in Ohio, going to the Marine Corps, and then, going to Yale and all that.
Ohio.
Go Ohio. It's more than just like getting people to shut up so they can loot the country, which is clearly part of it. But there's a loathing, there's a hatred there.
Oh, yes.
And I don't understand where that comes from. Why would you hate people who live in communities that your friends flooded with fentanyl? Like, why would you be mad at them? They're the ones whose life expectancy is going down. What did they do wrong? If there was ever a group of victims, it's rural Americans. So why would you hate them? That doesn't make sense to me, but they do. Why?
So I don't know that I have a perfect answer to this, but I think that rural America and the problems of rural America just show how much their entire worldview is broken. And so it sort of reflects back at them their own failure and their own lack of concern for their fellow citizens, right? So it's like one thing to say, well, we're going to ship all the jobs to China and we'll get a bunch of, cheap plastic toys in exchange. Or, we're going to invade Iraq and, it's going to be a total disaster and we'll kill a lot of innocent people, but we don't really have to think about it after the war is over. Or, we'll let 20,000 Haitians into this small town, but the employers will be happy because they'll get some cheap labor and then we won't have to think about it. But when the rural people or the small town people, the working class people start complaining about it, then you have to actually confront whether these things that you have done have actually made people's lives better. And I think that you sort of, confronted with that, right? So you and I have a mutual friend, I won't use his name, where, he was a huge advocate of the war in Iraq. And by the way, I was 18 years old, but I also was an advocate of the war in Iraq. I, in fact, enlisted in the Marine Corps in April of 2003. We invaded in March of 2003. Semper Fi to all the Marines out there. But okay, the war turned into a total disaster. A lot of young Americans got killed. A lot of innocent people got killed. And that should cause a thinking person to evaluate, well, what were the processes in my brain that led me to think that this was a good idea, and how can I change so that I don't get it wrong the next time? And I think we have a lot of friends who got it wrong, but they can't have that conversation with themselves because it's too morally challenging. Like they wouldn't be able to look themselves in the mirror if they realized, I did this thing that led to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of innocent people losing their lives. And so you could either do that thing, you could either reevaluate and say, maybe I screwed up, maybe I was wrong, maybe I should rethink how I understand the world. Maybe Donald Trump isn't a threat to democracy, maybe the person who's a threat to democracy is Kamala Harris, who is running for president without a single vote. But you can say to yourself, I screwed up and I'm going to think about it better. Or you can say the people who are complaining are bad and evil people. And the reason they're complaining is not because I screwed up, but because they are screwed up people. And I think that's what, I genuinely think that's what our leadership does. And there are people who are legitimately friends of mine who I think legitimately hate the community that I came from, because the community that I came from refuses to say, we're really glad that based on patriotic sentiment, we volunteered at record levels to enlist in the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, and then you sent us off to a really stupid war. Or we really love that you used to be able to go and raise a family on a single middle-class manufacturing income, but now that's really hard to do because of Kamala Harris's inflation crisis, but also because you guys shipped all the jobs to China, right? The people who refuse to say, thank you for making my life miserable, are they represent an opposition and a rebellion against our failed leadership class. And if our leadership class was healthy, they would say, we must have screwed up. But because they can't do that, they've decided to hate the people of their own country.
A lot of people seem to have been reaching the same conclusion recently, which is that being a little healthier, being spiritually grounded, eating right, paying attention to nature, all of those really matter. Sleep takes up a big portion of your day, like 1/3 of your life is spent asleep, and sleeping well makes you much happier and more productive. So you shouldn't be surprised that some of the products that we've been looking at to think about entering into partnerships with are based on sleep. And we've got one we really like. It's called Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth makes, among other things, bamboo sheets. Bamboo sheets? Well, we tried them, and they're awesome. Bamboo sheets are really soft and breathable, and they keep you cool all night long, and they get even softer with every wash. You got to try it. And they don't just make sheets, they do pajamas and robes, leisure wear, bath towels. They make a whole bunch of stuff out of bamboo. And it's cool. It's not just this weird, oh, it's bamboo. Actually, it's great. Try it. They make great gifts. At Cozy Earth, the quality is backed up by a 10-year warranty. They offer even a 100-night sleep trial. 100 nights. Didn't take us 100 nights to get into it, but try it for yourself. So make your life more comfortable. Head over to CozyEarth.com/Tucker and use the promo code Tucker for up to 40% off. You will feel the difference. CozyEarth.com/Tucker and use the promo code Tucker for a big discount.
I'm glad this is on tape because this is not flattery. I mean it. I've been interviewing politicians for over 30 years, and I can't remember ever hearing an analysis that deep and true from any of them. And I'm also struck by the fact that I know most of the Republicans in the Senate, maybe one or two exceptions, I can't imagine any of them saying 90% of what you just said, and yet you were on the ticket with Donald Trump. So that makes me think that the Republican Party is actually changing this time. Do you think that's true?
I mean, I absolutely do. And I think there's always going to be this kind of effort from the old guard establishment to try to return us to the old ways, the old broken ways. So it's not like a war that's totally over, but I do think that we're currently winning. And look, I have to give a ton of credit to my running mate, the guy at the top of the ticket, Donald J. Trump, because And you know this, and probably a lot of you in the audience know this, like I was a Trump critic back in 2016. And it's funny when Biden was still running and all of these journalists trying to like confuse how obviously unfit Biden was to serve in the Oval Office, they'd be like, well, Biden's really old, but you know, Trump isn't a spring chicken anymore either. And when people would say that, I'd be like, guys, Donald Trump remembers a tweet that I sent on September 3rd, 2015. He remembers the time and he remembers exactly what I said to the word. Like this guy's memory is as sharp as a tack. In fact, I wish that it wasn't because my life would be a lot easier, but these are not two 70-year-old people who are running for president who are in the same mental condition. One clearly has the energy to do the job and one clearly doesn't. And I've seen this now having been in the belly of the beast for all of 2 years, but I really wish that I had been on board earlier because what Trump dealt with in 2016, it cannot be overstated. And I'm talking about like friends of yours, people he had been friends with for 30 years, calling him and attacking him or going on national television and lying about him. When you challenge this ossified, broken ruling class in this country, there is hell to pay for it. And I've got just a little bit of the taste of it. I think Donald Trump has gotten 100 times worse than I have. And obviously, you know, he almost got literally killed just 7 weeks ago and then again like 3 days ago. But Trump, if he hadn't won the primary and if he hadn't won the general election, the Republican Party would be broken. He fixed it and actually created an opportunity for us to build something that's durable and that can work for the long haul. And I think, you know, so I think I was his first endorser in the United States Senate, and like all of my political advisors are like, why are you doing this? It's way too early in the primary. And it's because having not been on board in 2016, I realized that the 2024 primary would really be this sort of fundamentally, no matter who challenged him, and there were a lot of good people fundamentally that challenged him, it would ultimately come down to the old guard versus the pro-worker, pro-America party. And I just knew that's how the dividing lines would ultimately shake out, because the old guard, because a lot of them knew Donald Trump in business, because a lot of them know that he knows what they're up to, they hate him more than almost anybody. And they hate him because he does actually fight for the American people, and he does actually care about the citizens of his own country. And you can, look, one thing I'll say about President Trump that is genuinely unique is, look, he obviously is incredibly successful and incredibly wealthy. Like, nobody's gonna ever pretend that Donald Trump is a working class person, at least now in his life. But Trump actually really likes the people that he leads. And that includes, by the way, the people who didn't vote for him. He still really likes those people. And that is, I think, what is very different about President Trump versus, frankly, most of America's leadership, is when the cameras are off and they don't think anybody's listening, they talk about how much they think their own citizens are dumb, or, well, yeah, the public thinks this because the public doesn't understand economics. Or, well, if the public was just smarter, they would realize how smart our, Kamala Harris is for wanting to, like, destroy Social Security and Medicare for illegal immigration. Right? They actually think that their own people are stupid and they don't like them. But Donald Trump actually likes people, and I think it's one of the secrets to his success as a political candidate.
Well, watching him order at McDonald's is like one of the most amazing things ever.
It's hysterical.
It's impossible to imagine Carmela, or whatever she's calling herself, Harris, like, talk to the lady behind the counter about the differences in quality and weight and price between the Quarter Pounder and the Big Mac. And he has such strong feelings about it. I mean, he's really thought about it a lot.
Well, and again, this goes to his leadership style. Donald Trump actually really cares of what people think.
Yeah.
So he has absolutely thought to himself, what is the better value between the Quarter Pounder and the Big Mac? And he actually wants to know what the people who work there think about this question. And by the way, like, I have very strong views about this. Like, obviously the Quarter Pounder is a better deal. Right?
That's absurd. Without secret sauce, it's not even worth going there. But whatever. I mean, honest people disagree. Marlboro Winston, I get it.
You've allowed yourself to be manipulated by the elites. The secret sauce is not the thing that matters. It's the amount of meat. You get way more meat with a Quarter Pounder. And it's obviously, again, but look, the point is, okay, so let me give you an example of this. So the Saturday morning that President Trump was shot, I don't know if I've ever talked about this publicly, but I was down in Mar-a-Lago for the first time talking about becoming his vice presidential nominee. And it was kind of these crazy things, because all these reporters would stick microphones in my face and say, you're clearly on the short list, and have you talked to President Trump about it? And I'd say, no, I haven't. In fact, I don't even know if I'm actually on the short list, because I've never spoken with him. So the Saturday morning, I'm in Mar-a-Lago, we're talking about the VP thing, and he's like, I like to talk to everybody about who should be the VP. Like, I spent about 30 minutes talking to the gardener at Mar-a-Lago about who he thought should be the vice presidential nominee. And I'm sitting there, sweating bullets, like, well, sir, what did the gardener at Mar-a-Lago have to say about who should be the VP? Because this is a question that actually really impacts my life. So,
do you know the gardener, or is it just random?
No, but again, like, he actually likes to know what people think about things. That's one of his secrets of success as a political leader. So anyway, he goes to, Pennsylvania. He doesn't tell me that it's me. He says that it's probably going to be you. I'm like, oh, thanks. That makes me feel great. I'm totally going to sleep great tonight, knowing it's probably going to be me. He flies to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, of course, is nearly assassinated. God bless you guys. And he, then he makes the decision, I think, the next day, or maybe even Monday morning. I don't know, right? I don't know when he actually finally made the decision. Probably was just Monday morning, now that I think about it. You probably know better than I do. Anyway, the point is, I actually think that if you care about the people that you represent and the people that you lead, you should want to know what they think about an issue. And whatever disagreements you might have with President Trump, he genuinely cares about what people think about an issue. And it's why I think he's better plugged into what the electorate thinks than most political candidates.
I think that's right. The switch up, the disappearance of the president of the United States. Biden is still president, technically, correct?
I don't know.
I don't either, and I really don't know. I don't know what happened to him. He was like pretty famous at one point, and then he's just gone.
I saw some clip on social media that like Jill Biden was running a cabinet meeting. Was that real or was that?
For sure. She's a doctor, JD. Settle down. She's got this, okay? And anyone who hasn't read her dissertation on community colleges in the state of Delaware really should see where the doctorate comes from. She literally has a part of it where she's breaking down the proportion of by ethnicity of students, and she's like, it's about 40% Caucasian, about 37% African American, it's another 39% Hispanic, and then another 22% Asian. And I'm like, I'm not good at math, but
wait a second.
No, you should read Dr. Jill's dissertation. It's unbelievable. Anyway, she's running the government, just so you know.
I don't think that adds up to 100. I'm no genius,
no, it does, like 147, actually. But whatever, she's a doctor. But here's my question, and I don't mean to finger the media in this. Sorry. I spent my life in a newsroom. It's vulgar, I know. Kamala Harris went from being, regarded as a buffoon by everybody, including, every Democrat I know. You're constantly reading about, only Montel Williams likes her or whatever. Everyone made fun of her. And then, within 24 hours, she's this historic statesman. How was the media able to pull that off, honestly?
Yeah, a lot of shamelessness. One of the things that we say on the campaign trail, because it's true, is that, we do a lot of interviews. Like me and President Trump do a ton of interviews with hostile media, with friendly media, with everybody in the middle, and Kamala Harris doesn't. Now, part of the argument that we're trying to make is, to the American people, you shouldn't trust a person who's so terrified of the media that she runs away from them. You can't trust that person in a private meeting with Xi Jinping. But part of what we've been trying to do too is actually shame the American media, which is totally it's total historical revisionism right before our eyes. My wife even, who's a totally apolitical person, but right after they did the Kamala switcheroo, she sent me a bunch of clips of different people and how they spoke about Kamala Harris 3 months ago and how they speak about Kamala Harris today, and it's totally flipped. And we've been trying to shame the American media into looking themselves in the mirror and asking her some tough questions and actually reporting on her record. And you know what we've learned, Tucker? The American media has no shame.
They're here. I can feel their filthy presence.
I can see some of their. I can feel it.
You run into them on the road. What do they say?
Well, they'll say in private. Almost all of them will say, yeah, it's really ridiculous. Or in public, they'll say, well, we hope that she'll give us an interview. And it's well, but the democratic process requires that she gives you an interview before people start voting. Your job, if you have any job, and by the way, to the reporters out there, I know some of you are out there, your job is to not repeat Kamala Harris propaganda without at least getting a chance to ask her a question about it. And that's what...
Well, but it's really simple. I've been in the media my whole life. I know how it works. If you want a politician to do something, you attack that politician until the politician does what you want.
Yeah.
And so they could make Kamala Harris give interviews to everybody from TMZ to the Washington Post editorial page just by attacking her every day, but they won't. Why?
Well, because unfortunately, most of the American media, we need to be honest about this, most of the American media is in fact part of the very corrupt system that they pretend to report on, right? That's the answer. So, okay. So if you're, first of all, the news media business has been totally decimated by big tech, by the way. The reason why we don't really have local papers anymore is in a 20-year period, all of the advertising revenue that used to go classified ads in local papers now goes through Google, Facebook, so forth. So if you're a journalist, there's a very good chance that your paycheck fundamentally depends on the people who are getting rich off of this system. Now, that doesn't mean, by the way, and I know a lot of them, and I actually like them personally. It's one of my many faults is I like journalists personally. But the thing that they will say is they really believe the things that they're reporting, and they really believe that what they're saying and what they're doing is the truth. And they're right about that, by the way. I don't think that most of them are liars. I think most of them are just deluded. No offense, guys. But if they weren't deluded, and if there was somebody who was actually really asking, well, why are we spending so much time attacking Donald Trump because he dared to bring up the Haitian migrant problem in Springfield, and instead, why are we spending so much time attacking him instead of, I don't know, investigating any of the numerous issues that Kamala Harris has flip-flopped on in just the last 3 years? If there was a reporter who wanted to do that, they would not last long in those media organizations. So there's a basic selection bias. If you're a person who can honestly look at American society and say, oh, wait a second, American life expectancy is declining, right? The only industrialized country in the world where that's true. We continue to be more and more reliant on some of our biggest international adversaries to make the things that we need. Oh, and we're sleepwalking into a multi-continent, in other words, a world war, with a president who clearly doesn't even know who the hell or where the hell he is. Like, maybe the honest thing would be to really aggressively interrogate how we got here. But no. What the journalists have instead decided to do is they're gonna focus on like a sex scandal from 2 days ago that involves some random journalist who I don't even know and I've never even met. Right? There's like this weird sex scandal story going on right now. The media is obsessed with.
I don't think there was any actual sex in the sex scandal. That's how absurd it is.
I think that's right. But the media is more focused on that than they are on the fact that we are sleepwalking into World War III with Joe Biden as the president of the United States. And the reason why we have Joe Biden is because Kamala Harris lied about his mental fitness for office. Like, if you actually care about the truth, ask those questions and leave the salacious bullshit to the tabloids. But they can't do that. And if they did, Tucker, again, if they did, a lot of them would lose their jobs. And so it selects for people who are very trusting of the system and not for people who actually want to ask questions of that system.
The most interesting and newsworthy television show of the year is coming here to TCN. We are not bragging. That's actually true.
The president's been shot. I repeat, the president's been shot.
So our longtime producer, Justin Wells, and a team have been embedded, with no publicity at all, with Donald Trump on the campaign trail for months. They're the only crew capturing what is going on the campaign in real time, intimately. They're with Trump as he campaigns for the presidency across the country, and they've shot some amazing footage. It shows you what it's really like in there. So if you're a member, you will soon be able to get this docu-series covering the historic campaign, the fall of Joe Biden, never-before-seen footage from the assassination attempt at the Butler Township, Pennsylvania Trump rally, and a lot more. It's going to pull back the curtain completely. They are embedded inside the campaign. I can't wait to see it personally. But to get it first, go to tuckercarlson.com, become a member. The greatest television event of the year. We're proud to offer it.
It's just wild that one of the things that they've been able to ignore completely is the number of politically motivated prosecutions over the last 4 years. I think the congressman from this district, actually, Scott Perry, got hassled by the FBI. I think I may be missing this.
And I think Scott Perry's here, by the way. Great congressman.
Oh, he is?
Scott,
He's a great
if you're
guy.
out there. Hello.
Hassled by the FBI for asking, this is my read, not his, but asking questions about the last election. That's not a criminal offense. I know a bunch of people who are in jail right now, for political reasons in our country that's never really reported on. It's bizarre. And I guess the question is, if you guys lose, like, what would stop that from just becoming universal?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that anything would, because the animating bias, or the animating motivation, I should say, of Kamala Harris's Democratic Party is censorship. Because without censorship, you can't get all of the other things that they want. Like, you can't get the ridiculous foreign policy or the ridiculous trade policy, the wide open borders without censorship. And so if you look, and this is, by the way, I think this is actually the fundamental difference between the overheated political rhetoric on the left and on the right. And I hate, by the way, when people both sides this issue, they're like, well, we all need to tone down the rhetoric. Well, look, by the way, I try to be a very humble person. I agree we can all tone down the rhetoric. None of us is perfect, including me. But when Donald Trump has taken 2 assassination attempts in the last 7 weeks, it's not both sides that need to tone down the rhetoric. It's one side in particular. And you have to ask, but if you look at what is the animating focus of the political prosecutions, of the big tech censorship in 2020 and all the censorship around COVID, of the fact that the European Union, which basically wouldn't exist without American taxpayer protection. I mean, Europe, only 2 countries in Europe even have real militaries at this point, right? NATO is at this point a welfare client of the United States of America. So Europe is going after Elon Musk for free speech and threatening to imprison him for platforming who? Donald Trump, who is the likely next president of the United States. You go down the list, the animating bias is censorship. And if you think about it, what is the ultimate way? If you've tried to bankrupt a person, you've tried to jail a person, you've tried to, throw a person in prison, you've tried to kick them out of office, you've impeached them twice, what is the ultimate way to censor a human being? Taking their life. And I think this is really the difference between political rhetoric on the left and the right, which again, we don't always get it right on my side of the aisle, but we're never saying we want to censor the other side. We, in fact, want to have the debate. We're telling Kamala Harris, you should do more interviews, not less. You should get out there more because we get about 100,000 votes every time you open your mouth. But all kidding aside, we are not trying to censor the left. The left is trying to censor not just the right, but the entire country, which goes to show they are a threat to democracy. They cannot be rewarded with more political power. They have to be penalized. It's like when a kid, as I've learned as a young father, when a kid screws up and you just you reward them for it, they actually do it more and they do it worse. The only way to reward Kamala Harris is by making her president, and the only way to punish her and say, look, we don't accept censorship of our fellow citizens is to fire her and send her back to San Francisco. That's where she belongs.
So given that, every news outlet I've ever worked at, which is a lot of them, they're all controlled, obviously. And given that, the biggest tech platforms, which would be Google and YouTube, same company, openly practice censorship, all kinds of things you can't talk about. They'll take you off, demonetize you. Really, we're talking about X, actually. We're talking about X is the place where free speech lives.
Yeah.
And if you were to take that out, darkness would descend. That's just a fact. And if you want to know the totalitarian impulses of your ruling class, read The Atlantic magazine, where they announce all of it ahead of time. And they're telling you now that we need to shut down Elon Musk's X because there's just way too much free speech. And I wonder how seriously you take those threats.
Well, I take them very seriously. Look, if we've learned anything over the last 4 years is when these people say they want to do something, they actually mean it, and they intend to do it. And we actually have to take them seriously. When Kamala Harris ran saying that we want to suspend deportations, re-implement catch and release, which is basically just mass asylum fraud, and stop Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, even though I didn't vote for her, I voted for Donald Trump, I thought, well, this is crazy. They're not actually going to do this, and then they did. So when they say that they want to use the force of law to silence or even imprison Elon Musk for daring to host a free speech platform, we have to listen to them. And that is the one thing, the most awesome power in the physical world today is the United States government. Millions of people, the world's largest and most powerful military. If we give that over to people who are saying, not only we disagree with Donald Trump, not only do we disagree with Donald Trump's supporters, but we want to prevent them from participating in the American democratic system, that is some scary shit and we need to reject it. And that's exactly what I think, by the way, with your help, we're going to do.
So thank you for doing this. This has been a really interesting and amazing conversation. So last question for you. So I think if I'm reading this correctly, that Donald Trump has announced that he will not allow states and municipalities going forward, if elected in November, to continue being so-called sanctuary cities. Which means places or entire states in these 50 United States that openly ignore federal federal immigration law, which must be federal because it applies to all of us, and its effects are national. Someone comes into one state and go to your state. And I'm just thinking, reading this, like, this has been going on for decades. Any state or city that has a sanctuary city law is an open rebellion in the way that Fort Sumter was an open rebellion against the government of the United States. Why have we allowed this to go on for decades? I don't understand.
Well, the answer is we've allowed it to go on because the federal government still funds all of these cities. Like the sanctuary cities stuff is very expensive. Because when you invite millions of illegal aliens into your country, and then certain cities and municipalities invite thousands or even tens of thousands, I mean, the cost to illegal immigration in New York City, I believe, is north of $6 billion a year. In Chicago, I think it's around $500 million a year. Well, that money doesn't come from Chicago taxpayers. It primarily comes through federal subsidies. So if you want to end sanctuary cities, just cut off the money spigot to sanctuary cities. You don't get our taxpayer money if you refuse to enforce the law. It's actually, this one, man, some of this stuff is really complicated. This one is actually very simple. The federal government just needs to say, we control immigration law, right? There are some things the states and local governments control. The federal government controls like foreign policy, immigration law, and a few other things. And if you are not going to obey federal immigration laws, then we're going to cut off the paycheck, we're going to cut off the money, and you have to enforce our laws in order to get any more money from American taxpayers.
Well, but I know, but like when Central High School disobeyed federal law in Little Rock in 1956, they sent the 101st Airborne.
Yeah.
And this has been going on where states and cities are like, we basically are our own countries now. And no one's done anything. Can you just really quick tell us the mindset that allowed Washington to ignore this?
Oh, well, I don't think it's that Washington's ignoring it, Tucker. I think that it actually shows where the real power is, and that's with the federal bureaucracy. And our mutual friend Vivek Ramaswamy talks a lot about this, that the real, and again, like, you hear this term threat to democracy, it's always projection. When they talk about threat to democracy, they're always projecting on something else. Like, the real threat to democracy, you and I have talked about this, is if the President of the United States orders generals to do a troop redeployment and the generals refuse or lie to the president about what they've done, like, that's a threat to democracy. And by the way, that happened at the very end of Donald Trump's presidency, right? And none of those people got fired. None of them were even punished. So you ask about immigration in sanctuary cities. The answer to this question is the permanent bureaucracy in Washington doesn't want us to have a border. So even when you have a guy like Donald Trump who is using all of the powers of the presidency to try to enforce the southern border, like, the bureaucrats have to listen to him on that issue because they report to him. But they can make it easier for the state and municipalities to violate immigration law, and that's how they subvert the will of the American people's elected president. I mean, this is like a fundamental question. Ask yourself, who amongst the United States of America, which citizens voted to have 25 million illegal aliens invade this country? Like, I don't think anyone, even Democrats who disagree with me about exactly what to do with the illegal immigrants who are here, I don't think that they voted for a literal invasion of this country. Okay, you talk about inflation and all the unaffordability problems. Who voted to, in the name of environmental cleanliness, to shut down American energy and ship it to China, which is the dirtiest economy in the entire world? Nobody voted for that. So what these guys do, abetted by the media, is they run on slogans. The media covers up for it. They pretend that those slogans have substance. And then even when the American people see through the BS and elect a guy like Donald Trump, the permanent bureaucracy fights him every step of the way. One of the most important things, Tucker, that we are going to do when we win is that we are going to make the bureaucracy responsive to the American people. It has to happen. If you don't do that, you don't have a real constitutional republic.
I mean, you're really going to need to be tough to get that done. Are you confident you can do that?
Tucker, I'm confident we can do it because nobody has ever really tried, because for 40 years, we haven't had a real political opposition in this country, and now we do. Think about that. I mean, just take the three basic issues that we talked about: trade policy, immigration policy, foreign policy. There are disagreements even within the Republican Party about those issues, but every single one of those issues are winning issues with the American people. So what we're saying is, crazy as it sounds, we think the American people should have a government that reflects their best interests and their actual preferences, and we're gonna fight every single day to make it happen. And there's no reason to do this. I mean, look, as you know, my life was like very easy before I ran for political office, and Donald Trump's was way easier than mine. We're only doing this because we think that we can get it done. We have to get it done to save the country.
So I just want to stop by repeating something you just said. For 40 years, we haven't had an opposition party, and now we do. God bless you.
Thank you, guys. Remember, go vote. November 5th. Vote before or vote on November 5th. God bless you guys.
The big tech companies censor our content. I hate to tell you that, it's still going on in 2024, but you know what they can't censor? Live events. And that's why we are hitting the road on a fall tour for the entire month of September, coast to coast. We will be in cities across the United States. We'll be in Reading, Pennsylvania with Alex Jones, Fort Worth, Texas with Roseanne Barr, Greenville, South Carolina with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Sunrise, Florida with John Rich, Jacksonville, Florida with Donald Trump Jr. You can get tickets at tuckercarlson.com. Hope to see you there.